How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Tacoma Beast channel, where, as you all know, it's all about the taco. Today we're in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm hanging out with Sam Webster, and we're gonna be bringing you up to speed with Sam's build-up. Dude, what have you been doing? I know it's been, what, 5 months?
It's been 5 months since the last time we talked. Last time you guys were here, I expected it to be a 2-month build, but we're way past that, but making really good progress. I mean, the truck is very different from the last time that you saw it.
It looks different, dude. It looks like you've been working.
Yeah, it's a way less Tacoma than it used to be. I have cut out a lot of things. I've sold a lot of parts. I've hacked up a lot of the body parts and stuff. So I really want to show you guys what I've been up to and get you up to speed on how the build is going.
Let's do it, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait to show you guys the back of this truck. It's insane.
Yeah.
Let's start in the front.
Yeah.
What's up with this?
I know, it looks kind of funny. To clear these big 37-inch tires that I'm going to be running, I had to cut out the wheel wells. The fender wells are completely gone from the firewall forward, and so these guys are just to hold the core support in the same spot before I cut it out, because when I build the tube frame out of the front, it's going to be a lot easier having this here. So I can build it out so that the mounts are all in the same factory locations without guessing where the radiator sits and things like that. So this is just to hold it in place until I build the rest of it. With these 37-inch tires, I'm also gonna have to cut out the fender well. So I'm kind of have to reduce the foot space inside the cab to be able to clear these tires, because this Dirt King long travel kit has quite a bit of caster. So when those tires come up, the tire wants to move back into the cab like that. So that's another thing I need to address in the front, but just haven't gotten there yet. Something else you'll notice is the windshield's gone.
Yeah. Did you take that out yourself?
I did. I had to get rid of it though, because there was no way to finish the cage with the windshield in there, because to build the cage, I had to slide the tubes in and out, and then to weld the top of the cage, which you guys will go and look at that in a second. I actually removed the whole roof cage once it was tacked in place, pulled it out of the windshield and welded it up on the ground, and then slid the whole cage back through the windshield and put it back in there.
All right, moving into the cab. Dude, I helped you remove this dash.
Yes.
So you put it back
the
together,
dash,
or is it just
No, it's just kind of hanging in there at the moment. Dash is kind of an interesting thing. I live in Utah and it gets cold, and you have to have a defroster when you get ice on the windshield, otherwise it's a total pain. But you lose the ability to have the defroster work when you put the cage in here. And I can kind of slide this up if you want to see what I'm talking about. So
no way, dude.
There's a bar that these windshield bars land on, this dash bar here.
That's crazy.
But you can see it sits right on top of the vents. And so that was kind of a problem that took some thinking. Donnie actually came up with this idea. And what we did is we ended up drilling holes through the dash bar, plugged it, and kept them kind of long on the bottom side, welded it all up so it's still really strong. And now the defroster vents, the air will actually blow through the dash bar and out the vents on the dash and work just like a factory thing.
You figured it out.
Fingers crossed, yeah. But I think it's a pretty elegant solution to this. I hadn't seen anybody else do something like this. Yeah, so the defroster will still work. Dash is back in here because I was trimming it to have these dash bars come through. So this hole in the corner is where the speakers sit, the tweeters. And so I can't run the tweeter speakers anymore. And so that has become just an area for the cage to pass through. And that worked out really nicely. Didn't really have to hack a whole lot to get that to work. And then you helped me remove pretty much the entire interior last time.
I helped you pull it all apart, man. Now you're doing the hard part.
Yeah, no, the hard part. And I've sold almost every part that I've taken out of it.
No way.
Yeah.
Like all the OEM parts?
The OEM seats are gone. I've sold those. If you look in here, the sunroof is gone.
Yeah.
All the mechanism, the tracks and everything. That's because I wanted to get the cage up high. We can talk about that later, but that's gone. The headliner is for sale. I haven't sold that yet. That's kind of a weird piece to sell. And most likely I'm not gonna be using any of it anyways, because the cage is gonna get gusseted to the frame. So I'll run some plates that go from the cage to the cab.
Yeah.
So it'll all be tied together, because the cab mounts are all cut off now.
Yeah.
And so what's holding up the cab of the truck is actually the cage. Those rubber bushings, people do the cab mount chops and all that. I don't even have them anymore. It's just the cage work that's holding this up.
That's insane.
Yeah, so.
So you're gonna make it look nice now.
Yeah, it'll have like dimple dyed plates that'll come down on the sides, dimple dyed plates that run around the top, and the back bar. And then these ones I think will look the coolest on the front because you can see it through the windshield.
Yeah.
So that's fun. That's going to be one of the last things I do.
What are you going to do with the sunroof since you sold it?
I don't know. I think I might just make a little lip and I could put the glass in and just glue it.
Yeah.
So I can keep that there, or a piece of Lexan, or I'll just make a piece of sheet metal that'll fit in that hole and Bondo over it or something and just make it disappear. I haven't gotten there. The reason I got rid of it is because I wanted the cage high and away from your head, because when you're sitting in the seat, you don't want those bars close to your head.
Yeah.
Like if you hit a bump, you don't want to be bouncing your head off of it. That's really bad.
Yeah.
It would make it so you have to wear a helmet whenever you're in this, and I want to daily drive it. So the sunroof mechanism is all gone, removed the entire thing, and tucked it up as high as I could. And I also had to cut out a bunch of tabs and stuff for the drains for the sunroof, which all ran along here.
Yeah.
The grab handlebars, mounts, those are all gone. One of the cross members for the roof is gone. So this windshield bar was kind of tricky because there was a big boxed section that sat down here, maybe another inch. And when you were sitting in the seat, if you had this bar below that, it's like in your line of sight.
Oh,
so
no way.
it's really annoying. So if you're just street driving or whatever, you have this bar in your vision, like it's intrusive on the windshield. And I didn't like that. And also, if I haven't decided if I'm gonna do these or not yet, but the intrusion bars that you see a lot of desert race trucks have, they're like these big V's in the windshield. If that bar was there, they would be at an angle that they wouldn't do a whole lot because they'd be laid back so far to contact that dash bar. So I was able to put a bend in this and cut out that box section and tuck that up into that hole that was now there. And now you don't see it at all. It's not in your line of sight, and it makes it so that those intrusion bars sit a little bit more upright. So it'll make it a little bit safer too. So that was kind of a fun one to figure out.
What about this center part? And I feel like this is the most important part, no?
Yeah, the center part's cool. So this took a lot of thought to, because before I could put the center bar in, I needed to know where my seats were going to be. And so I spent a lot of time mocking the seat up in here, which is a Corbeau race seat. So you sit lower in the seat compared to like a regular OEM seat. And so got that mocked up in here, figured out the angle that I wanted. And once the seat was figured out, then I could start messing around with these back bars. This bar, as you can see, it's kicked forward.
Yeah.
That's because I was thinking about the rear occupants. So when you're sitting in the back seat, you don't want these bars like right in your knees. And I wanted people to have foot room. And so I laid the whole bar forward to get more foot room. And then it's also at the same angle as the seat is when you're sitting in it. And so if I needed to slide the seat back or forward, you're not smashing into the bar. It's at the same angle going forwards and backwards.
So dude, there's a lot of like future planning involved in this. A lot of, like every move you make, you have to think like 10 steps ahead.
It's mostly planning. I have Donnie, who has been coaching me through this whole thing, which is amazing because he's a real expert on this. But even with Donnie's help, the two of us just sit there and think about it for sometimes days before I do anything, because what I do here is going to affect me down the line. And it's probably like 80 or 90% thinking and 10% doing, you know. It's weird. I didn't expect that.
That's why it takes so long, right?
Yeah. Well, and also I'm learning the processes of building as I'm going. I'd never used a tube bender before. I've never notched tube before. This is the first cage I've ever built. And so I'm learning the process as I'm doing it too. So that adds on to the amount of time that you're spending doing this. So also it's expensive. This tube is like $9 a foot. And so
no way.
When you mess something up, you cut it a little bit too short. You know, it's a lot of money that you're throwing down the drain. I mean, you can reuse some of it in other places, but I didn't want to be super wasteful and have the project snowball like super far out of the budget. Surprisingly, all the stuff that I've sold out of the truck has paid for everything that I've done.
Oh, no way.
So I'm mostly breaking even.
Yeah.
I'm renting the shop, so that's not factored into it. But if I was just looking at parts sold versus parts bought, I'm kind of breaking even, which I was not expecting.
That's a goal right there. That's really awesome.
Yeah, so for people that want to do crazy stuff like this,
it's definitely doable.
It's doable. Yeah, you got to spend some time haggling with people and listing parts, and it's annoying, but you can kind of you can do pretty well selling stuff. Yeah.
What was your biggest challenge building this cage?
So the roof structure was definitely the hardest part because I wanted to get those bars as far away from your head as you could, like I said. But each one of these tubes is notched in multiple angles, and it's bent also. And so just learning how to manipulate the tube and make sure I'm notching at the correct angle and things like that took a long time. So just the roof was like a month's worth of work.
So Sam, before we move to the back, what's up with those chucks that you have down there?
So when I was figuring out where the cage was going to poke through the cab of the truck and mount to the frame, you can put these little blocks in here. You cut it a little bit short, and it looks kind of funny because the tube isn't long enough, right? What you do is you plug the tube. So you actually slide a smaller diameter tube inside that, and then this is 2-inch, and then you slide another piece of 2-inch pipe on top of that, which then goes through the floor. So it gives you the ability to weld up inside the cab, that seam. So you want that accessible. And then you can make the bottom length whatever length you need it to be. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck trying to weld something that's right along the floor line and melting the really thin sheet metal. And so, like I said, the cab is not going to be mounted to the stock body mounts anymore. And so when this one is cut off, I can plug that, make a little mount that hooks to the frame, and then that will be the mounting place for the cab. You can actually see under this B-pillar bar that I have one made already. It kind of looks like a little tiny rock slider.
Oh, nice.
So it's got a plate that's welded to the frame.
That is so cool,
a little
dude.
Horizontal piece, and then this tube that's up here comes through and contacts that. It's just tacked in place now. That's what I did there for the B-pillar. It's gonna be very similar for the A-pillar, but the C-pillar, I'm actually landing right on top of the frame.
Whoa, dude, you cut out a lot.
So something that I was learning from Donnie is rather than cutting little pieces out to like give yourself room to work, just cut out a big panel, and then you can just tack that back in place and grind it flush again. So I cut out big areas so that I could see what I was doing, I could work effectively, and I could get the welder in there and actually weld where I needed to go, because it's hard to get into these little nooks and crannies if you have a tiny little window. So cut out a big window on both sides, and that's landed directly on the frame. And that's right by where the link mounts are also. So that's gonna be a really strong section of the frame now, so that when the suspension is cycling like crazy or we hit a jump or whatever, it's a really strong foundation for that to take the impact.
Dude, that's incredible.
Yep, it's all welded up and the main structure is done, but there are a few bars that I haven't bent up and put in here yet, and that's just because it's gonna be really annoying because I'm gonna be climbing over them. It's the door bars. So those will go in, and then there'll be various bars that'll go in here for mounting the seats and things like that. That's not what I'm focused on now. I had to get this part of the cage built so that I could work on the back, and that's what I'm digging into at the moment. The back section has a lot going on, and it's been really complicated. And there's one major thing that's different from the last time you were here, and that there's no frame.
You did it, dude.
Yeah.
You cut off the frame. That's when you were, like, you knew you were fully committed to this whole project. Yeah. I mean,
well, when you were here last, I was kind of flip-flopping. Like, do I cut it off? Do I not cut it off? What are the benefits of cutting it off?
What made you cut it off?
Donnie. So Donnie and I did a bunch of measuring and figured you may as well cut it off, because the accident that it was in bent the driver or the passenger side frame a little bit. And so if I was building this all out and building the cage and everything, I'd be building to a crooked frame. So I'd be compensating for things constantly. And I was gonna notch the frame out also to get a little bit more up travel. And you'd have to clean the whole frame off and get all the mounts. And we got to the point where I was like, just cut it off. It's gonna be easier. You can build what you want and you can get a ton more up travel.
Now you're fully committed.
Now I'm fully, yeah. There's no frame.
That's crazy, and I'm assuming you also sold the rear end of the OEM rear end.
Yeah, I have a different axle in here. This is actually a Ford axle, a Ford 9-inch. This one is from a company called Spider Tracks. I found it on Craigslist for like 1,200 bucks. I sold my axle for 1,500 bucks, and so I made money by buying this axle for it. And it's got a spool in it.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's got 488 gears in it. It's got a spool, which means the tires are always locked. So rather than flipping on an air locker or something, this is locked 100% of the time. So the gears are actually just locked in there.
Nice.
So
that's what you want, right, for what you're building?
For a race truck, that's great. For a street truck, not so much, because as you go around the corners, it's going to be popping and making noises, and this will be street legal. So I'll be driving it around the street, and it'll be annoying.
He's going to be driving to work. That's going to be sick.
That's going to be a cool car to drive to work in. You can see there's big holes cut in the back of this, and those holes are, one, for access, two, the shocks are going to have to live inside. I thought I could avoid it, but it ended up being that the top of the shock probably sits 2 inches inside of the cab, and I've extended the wheelbase 5 inches.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what are we dealing with? Like the wheelbase, did you shorten it, make it longer?
Everybody asks me that. They're like, why did you shorten the wheelbase on your truck? And it's an optical illusion. I didn't shorten it, I actually extended it. So the wheelbase is right in between a double cab long bed and a double cab short bed wheelbase. It's 132 inches.
Did you do that on purpose?
I did that on purpose because I would have to put the shocks fully inside of the cab to make that work. So the shocks would be going through where the cage is. So this would all have to be redesigned. And it would also make it so that I've got these big pockets that are sitting inside that the shocks are mounted to. So I could only probably run one rear seat.
Yeah.
It would be a center seat. And I really wanted to have 2 back seats. Or 1 back seat in a storage area. I could put a fridge or something there.
Yeah. So question, something that I noticed here. I see that you have this bar going through it, which I'm assuming this is where the shocks are going to be mounted, or like a stencil that you're building.
Yeah,
right?
it's. I'm just mocking things up at the moment.
So are you going to be able to install the glass here?
No. So I can't run the rear glass, so it'll be a Lexan window.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So which will be kind of cool.
Yeah.
The other thing, like if I kept my bed and had fenders, I would probably be fine keeping the glass, but since I got rid of that, it's just open, and so it's going to be throwing rocks at the glass, and most likely shattering the back window, like on the first trip out. As you can see, I had to cut the window frame to get the shock mount in there, so it's not even possible to get the stock glass back in there. But I think it'll look cool, having a little pocket cut out for where the shocks are going through into the cab.
That's crazy, dude. Let's talk real quick. Why is the axle lifted up like this? Why do you have it on jacks right now? What are you measuring for?
So I'm trying to find 2 things. I'm working on finding where full bump is going to be. So I talked about that up travel number of like 9 inches that I gave AccuTune. I've increased that to about 15 inches, the way I have it set up here, which is massive, like almost close to 2 times the up travel. And up travel, especially for some like a high-speed desert vehicle, is what you want. You see a lot of photos of pre-runners jumping and the tires sag out really far. Super cool looking. It's good. You have to have droop, but I want as much up travel as I can get, because as you're going across bumps really, really fast, the tires are coming up into the rear cage structure. And as soon as you bottom out one of those shocks, it picks up the back. All that energy goes into the back of the truck and wants to buck the rear end over the front. So the more up travel you can get, the more the body can stay flat and the tires move underneath it versus you bucking off bumps like that. So I built a bunch of up travel into it. So it's going to be like 60% up, 70% up. 70% is kind of pushing it. I'm going to try and dial it back a little bit from there. And then the rest of that's going to be droop.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah. But it's hard to find the right balance, because the more up travel you get, the higher the tires get in relation to the body of the truck. If you measure from the bottom of the tire to the ground, and then the bottom of the frame to the ground, it's about 2 inches. And what that means is...
So 2 inches of clearance.
When this is fully compressed, the truck sits 2 inches off the ground.
And that's the cab.
That's
off the cab, right?
Off of the frame. So
off of the frame, correct.
So the cab will sit a little bit below that. You're kind of walking that line between smashing your cab on the ground and getting that up travel that you want. So that's what I'm working on figuring out. Like a good number is like 3 to 6 inches. And the way that this sits now, it's like 2 inches.
So what are you gonna do about that?
I don't know, it's a little excessive. I kind of riding that line where it's uncomfortably low. Yeah. Because if I'm go to Moab or somewhere and I'm doing some rock crawling, you really don't have a whole lot of clearance. When you change the up travel, you're changing where the shock is mounted in relation to the cab, which changes your ride height also. Not only are you trying to see how high the tires are gonna get a bump, you're checking clearance from the frame to the ground, and you're also trying to figure out what the ride height is gonna be. That's why you see these rods in here. I cut these to be the length of the shocks at full compression. So this is the bypass, those huge ones that we got at AccuTune that we checked out, and then this one is the coilover. And
Fully compressed.
Fully compressed. And then I've added an inch because I'm getting new arms for these also. And those arms require a longer rod end on it. So I've made these 1 inch higher. But the goal when you are at full bump, you want the shock to be 90 degrees to this arm. So if you take an angle finder, put it on here. I'll do it right now. Put an angle finder on there, zero it out. So this becomes our new reference point. Then you stick that on the shock, the mock-up shock. You want that to be 90 degrees. So we're right about there. So at the current setup, current ride height, that's kind of where the shock wants to live. And so as I change the ride height and I change the up travel, where that shock mounts changes. That's why those rods are in there, so I don't have to keep taking the shocks out, putting them back in, scratching them up, and they're heavy. This is just a quick and dirty way of mocking it up. And I just keep tacking things in place and then cycling the suspension, taking a bunch of measurements, figuring out where the truck is gonna sit, and just do it over and over and over again. There's a really cool truck behind me, and the back half on this is really interesting. It's kind of different compared to what a lot of the more traditional pre-runners or race trucks look like, just in the way that they land on the frame and how they're angled up, things like that. And so I copied this back half. I drew it out in CAD. I learned Fusion 360 just so that I could wrap my head around how I wanted to design this. So I built all that out in CAD, made a couple different designs, and then started doing this, just cycling it up and down, trying to figure out what angle that shock mount's gonna come up at, where my ride height is gonna be.
All right, Sam, you had mentioned that planning is a huge part of this process, right?
Yeah.
You have to think 10 steps ahead because one decision can lead into a disaster.
Yep.
Or if you thought about it right, you know, it could lead you into something great.
Totally.
What's next?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking about now is shocks, obviously, but then fiberglass too. Like I mentioned that I stretched the wheelbase, which means I can't run those big Fiberworks fenders that I had because they're not long enough to cover this. Second part is the tires now go up so high at full bump that I would probably have to cut a hole in the top of the fenders for the tires to come through, which is something I don't really want to do. So I found a way around that. I'm actually going to run these bedsides over here and grab them. So these are from a trophy truck.
That's crazy.
These are made trailer products. This is something that Donnie had in the shop. He actually was mocking it up on his race truck and decided to go with something else. And some people are gonna like it, some people are gonna hate it, but I don't.
The important thing is that you like it.
Yeah.
And you're making it your truck, you know?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be cool. And this will match up. I don't think people are gonna say, oh, that wasn't made for a Tacoma. As long as I get that body line right here lined up, I think we're gonna be in good shape. And you can see how it looks when it's tucked. It looks
crazy. It looks gnarly.
It looks pretty cool. So I'm happy with that. And then the second thing that I'm thinking about as I'm putting all this together is how long is the truck gonna be with this glass on here? So have the glass centered on the wheel. Where's the end of the truck gonna end? And then I wanna go 3 or 4 inches past that and have it stick out the back a little bit. And I've been talking to some builders, and actually the builder of this cool F100 truck behind me in specific, and his recommendation is to get as much weight behind the rear axle as you can. I've got this fuel cell here, which is gonna go in it, and I'm doing that because I'm trying to compensate for the lack of travel in the front. When I say lack, it's not really a lack. It's still 12 or 13 inches with the Dirt King long travel kit, but that's a bolt-on kit. This is something totally custom in the back, and so this is way more capable than that. And so the front will be, I don't want it pounding into these bumps and hitting a full compression constantly.
Bottoming out.
Bottoming out. So fuel cell goes back here, spare tires go back here, jack will go back here, spare parts will go back here, all behind the rear axle. It's gonna lift that up. And so the front end is gonna skip over the bumps. The rear end is gonna do the meat of the work. It's gonna be cycling up and down really hard. And so by putting everything back here, there's a lot more weight that needs to be carried. So you can run a stiffer spring. And when you run a stiffer spring, what that's gonna do is it's gonna wanna push those tires down into the bumps even harder. So it's a traction thing. So the more the truck is pushing those tires down into all the bumps, the more time the tires are gonna be in contact with the ground, the faster you're gonna go. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. One of the downsides is you become really tail heavy, so it's not gonna corner as well. That's a sacrifice you just kind of have to make, but I'm all right with that.
So you're gonna be a jumper or a drifter? I guess not a drifter.
No, it's not going to drift very well. It's going to be pretty tail happy. It's going to want to, once the tail starts moving, it's going to want to keep going.
Yeah.
Where if that weight was more centered in the truck, it would act more like a drift car. It would be more centered.
Nice.
So those are the things I'm thinking about right now as I do the suspension and think about building the back half. And that's all stuff that's probably going to be done next time I see you. And there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of thinking and figuring, but it's coming. It's really...
It's crazy what you said,
yeah.
80% thinking and then 20 to 10%
yeah.
doing.
Yeah, it's mostly planning things out, and because I don't want to have to do it twice.
Fellas, that about wraps it up for this video. Sam, thank you for bringing us up to speed.
Yeah.
If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button. If you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe. Next week, we're going to bring you up to date on Sam's next projects. Fiberglass is going on, gas tank is going on. This truck is going to look awesome. See you in the next video.